This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosch and Tom Dosch. With their partners David Marshall and Trip Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast. We have Spencer Weber here in our Dallas office on the podcast with us today. So, Spencer, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
Spencer is the Vice President of Development and Investment at Ascent. And we've talked about Ascent before on the podcast. It's the investment arm of DMRE. So, DMRE being the land brokerage arm, and then Ascent really being the land investment arm. And so, Spencer, you and I share a wall.
Right.
Offices right next to each other, so we get to see each other all the time, which is fun. And it's been a while. We've been talking about having you on the podcast, so glad that you could join. I think it'll be a good episode this morning.
Yeah, thank you guys again for having me. And we've joked before about sharing the wall. We keep talking about putting in a sliding door or a window, so we just keep sharing deals back and forth.
So little window going back and forth.
That's right.
Smart.
Like Tim and I, Spencer's an Aggie, and so we'll do the hullabaloo connect, like knock.
That's right.
On the wall if we need something, and then we know it's like, okay, I need to run around the corner.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to have more Aggies in the office, and in a year like we've had, it's been fun to be an Aggie.
Definitely. Yeah, we gotta enjoy it.
Yeah,
it's been great. And Spencer's a real Aggie too. I mean, Tom and I went to school there, and we love it. But Spencer's in the core, and I think you bleed maroon, Spencer. So
that's right.
It's a different level.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, great experience, and great time in Aggie land. So just cool to be part of some of the oldest traditions on campus. Just being a part of that was was a lot of fun.
Why don't we start maybe by talking a little bit about Ascent and about just what Ascent is and the way we look at land investment? Because I was at a lunch yesterday with a guy in the business, and we were talking about land investing, and we were talking about different opportunities, and his perception of land investors was just very basis driven. And even to the point of he was familiar with land investors that are looking at large acreage tracts, like hundreds of acres, but then they're always capped out at like a certain price point. And so he mentioned $30,000 an acre. So can you really pay more than $30,000 an acre? And I was explaining to him the way that we've set up Ascent and what we're looking for at Ascent is really very different than that. And in a lot of cases, we're actually more looking at development ready sites that from a pricing standpoint, we've paid in the, dollars per square foot, the high dollars per square foot, but we also were looking at like urban infill sites, and we could be looking at sites in the, much more expensive, I guess you'd say. I mean, there's who knows what the range is, but where it's maybe a covered land play or could be a mixed use or a mid-rise redevelopment. Just a different way of looking at land investment. But maybe we start there with what Ascent's thesis has been, and then we can kind of get into just what Ascent has been busy doing and what we're excited about, in this year.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would say Ascent started probably the seeds of Ascent started back in maybe 2018, 2019. Tom, I don't know if you remember, but there was a deal over on 34th Street in Houston that we put in our contract. I think it was the first deal we really put in our contract. We're brokering deals, we're not really buying deals ourselves. And we found this assemblage of three owners and got into it. And, we're under contract at a really good basis. And then there's a couple of development issues that came up that we just didn't fully understand. And we kind of got scared and assigned it to Hines, and they ended up building the deal and being really successful on it. But that was the beginning of that interest. Then you fast forward to 2021, and Tom, you approached me with, hey, I think we need to do this. We need to start buying deals. You're seeing deals. And so we officially launched Ascent in 2022, which we didn't know was the top of the market. Where land was super frothy. There's a lot happening across all asset types. And then the next couple of years were going to be rocky years for land. But we started buying deals, and today we've bought about $80 million in land deals, all cash across the Texas Triangle, and then been able to exit a number of those at a greater number than what we've put in already, and we still own probably on a more than 60 or 70% what we bought. So feel really good about the success and the team we put together. And I think, Spencer, you're kind of the answer to that early problem we have of being brokers and understanding the market and understand, hey, this is a real deal, but then getting mired a little bit in some of these just complexities and development issues that come up that we just didn't have the expertise to handle.
Yeah, maybe speak, Spencer, a little bit to some of the unique development challenges that we've run into on some of these deals. Because I remember, Tim, specifically on that deal you're talking about, it was 3-owner assemblage. And then, anytime you're dealing with something like that, there's contracts you're trying to line up. And then there's always kind of a shot clock. And that was our biggest concern, was like, we don't want to get in a situation where we're having to buy like one of these tracks or all of these tracks, but there's some unknown. And so I remember there was an easement issue that was pretty significant. And there was I think it was a natural gas line, but it wasn't on the survey. Something like that, came up. But you've seen a lot. I mean, so you started, Spencer, with us in early 2024, and to date purchased 11 properties and all different kinds of properties. And so maybe you just hit a couple of those development challenges. Because as brokers, we know, there's a good price, there's a good area, there's a market for this, but then we're pretty much always having to solve or evaluate some development challenge before we can move forward on something.
Yeah, for sure. Well, part of what is super cool about Ascent is just the number one, like the volume of deals that we get to see that the DMRE brokers are bringing to us on any given day. And so anywhere that we see some immediate interest on, this is a good land basis, or this is just an area that developers want to be in, we can get in the way of future development, is really when we start digging in and try to find out, okay, what is publicly available information as much as possible before we start spending more time in actual dollars assessing deals. And so, I think over the last 2 years, we've seen a handful of deals with boundary line issues where we're having to work with surveyors and title companies to get some of those issues resolved. Maybe the property owner had no idea that even existed because their neighbor filed a plat and the coordinates didn't all jive, and so we had to get that sorted out. Some of the other things are just looking forward to public improvements, and so we know a lot of times where cities are going in and putting in new utilities, and so we know there's going to be a right-of-way take or something that the current owner is already working through, and so we can take that. We've got some great relationships with a lot of the cities that we're already working in, or where DMRE developer or brokers have already been working on deals, and so we can kind of go to them with some questions and start to get some of that figured out. So I think utilities are just super critical in working on land deals everywhere. And so especially what we've seen a lot in North Texas is just with the massive amount of growth is that like cities are already behind the 8 ball. Just about everybody is. And so trying to figure out how are they unlocking that and what are the opportunities on who's got a CCN or who's got a MUD next door. On a lot of tracks we look at, was it big enough that we can justify a MUD and try to go in and establish utilities for that tract in order to bring in developers and just really cut down their clock on work that they've got to do up front in entitlement process and really get it ready. So those are some of the things that we look for. I think in terms of deals that we've done in the past year, a lot of it has looked like I mentioned, some boundary line issues has been one that's popped up on a couple of deals. Really opportunities with sellers that kind of get in a bind, either a family estate or an elderly family member that is kind of willing to sell, or the family needs the money and needs to get out of the property, and there's an opportunity for us to come in and move quickly to the benefit of the seller in order to get out of the deal. But more importantly, just understand that we do have to have a good basis if we're going in, and just understanding what those obstacles are going to be on a tract. And so we've had a lot of those situations where we can kind of help coach them through even what the process looks like. So we closed a deal earlier this year in our fund that just came out of a relationship we had. We own the property next door, and so we had been in contact with them just kind of as neighbors and keeping up and say, hey, if you notice anything fishy, please give us a call out there. And we've got an ag tenant that should be a good neighbor to you and something like that. And then the opportunity came about where they were really looking to get out of the way, and so we were able to step in really quick and say, hey, just we'll handle it. We'll walk you through it and be a good buyer for you and just help you understand, like, what are you going through in this process. And, when I send a surveyor out there, I send an environmental consultant to go look at your site. Like, we're not trying to do any kind of funny business, but we're just doing some due diligence. This is what it means. So a lot of that has kind of gone into how we look at deals and just have the story behind each of them.
Yeah, that's good. When you were talking, a couple of things came to mind, one being utilities. And we run into this a lot on the brokerage side, where a lot of investors just own sites with no utilities. And it's kind of the belief that if you buy it cheap enough, then utilities are going to come. And I think it's interesting, and we've seen this with Ascent, trying to turn an investment in 2 to 3 years, which is really our goal. We're always trying to do it quick. And I would say for land investment, that's really fast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you see people get really fortunate. They do a simultaneous close, or they do a inside of a year close. We've had a couple of those, but it's amazing how quickly 12 months goes by, 2 years goes by, 3 years goes by. And what we've realized is there's always market risk. Even on good sites, the market risk is really just time. And so we've bought sites that we really believe in. They're great sites. We haven't turned them yet. We've owned them 2-3 years. We've had other sites that we've sold within a few months, or inside of a year, or right at a year. Like Tim said, we've returned more than we've placed on all of the deals, on just a small handful of them. But it's interesting when people talk about land investment, a lot of the way I get pitched deals, and we look at, like you said, DMRE brokers bring us tons of deals. And then we have other brokers that have brought us great deals outside of DMRE too. But a lot of the deals that get pitched to me, it's like, well, it's an inexpensive site. There's not utilities, but I think it's going to be a great investment in like 7 years. And it's like people pick they pick these dates that are further out, where they feel like that 7 years is like forever.
Yeah, surely.
So surely by 7 years. And we've talked about it before on the podcast. I've been doing land now for about 13 years. Tim's been doing it a lot longer than that. We could probably both talk about properties in like pretty good parts of town that are worth the same today as when we started in the business, like 13 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There's not always
or less.
There's not always appreciation. And sometimes you do see the growth coming and you're like, that's going to be a great part of town. And even when the growth comes, 10 years flies by.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, wow, okay, now it's finally time. So I think what's really difficult about what we're trying to do is we're really trying to invest in those properties that we know maybe they don't have utilities today, but we know they're coming. Like one of the big properties we bought last year, it didn't have sewer when we bought it, but we knew it would have it within 6 months because the public infrastructure project was already in the works.
That's right.
So it's like that type of thinking is the only way you're going to be able to get these, unless you just get lucky, it's the only way you're going to be able to make these, faster investments.
And I think what's really unique for us is that we're buying not like a typical investor who's just trying to buy a path of growth and get lucky and just hope that everything comes in around you. We're buying really with the end user in mind, with the ultimate developer in mind. So we're buying sites that either are a currently development ready site, or that, Spencer, you're able to help us get development ready by solving some of these issues and knowing that we can solve them with some time. And what we've seen just working with, now, selling, hundreds and hundreds of these deals across the state, is oftentimes developers just need some time and they need to solve these development issues. But if they can get someone who will give them time and get the development issues solved, they're willing to pay a really good amount for the site, whatever market is. And sometimes they'll even set a record for what a market pricing is. But the struggle is always these sellers that, they want a lot for their property. They won't give very much time. They don't know anything about their property. And the developer doesn't have time to come in and do all the appropriate due diligence. Maybe it's waiting for utilities to come in. Maybe it's investing in the mud to get capacity up. All these different issues that come up on a site. And so what Ascent's been able to do is come in and say, hey, this is a development site. This is a site we can put in a pipeline for a developer, but maybe it's not ready yet. Maybe the seller needs a super fast close. They need like a 30-day close. We've done deals as fast as like 3 weeks. Developers aren't going to do that. Or to your point, Tom, about the deal in Austin, utilities are coming. We know they're coming, but a developer's not going to wait 2 years for them to come. They can't just go buy and sit in the dirt, but we're able to do that. We're buying all cash. Most of our deals are in ag, so we don't have to worry about the high carry with taxes. And so we can afford to buy them, fix the development issues, and then work with our clients to put a deal in their pipeline that a return that works very well for our investors and for us, but that also hits their objectives, to develop whatever they want to develop on the property.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. It's one of the things that I really think is just fun about what we do. Like, I got a text before we started recording this morning from a client that said, and it's a client I know really well, but he's like, "You guys buy land for developers, right? That they know that they'll be able to develop." And it's like, now what's neat about having invested in close to $100 million worth of land, having $100 million land fund to go invest in land in the Texas Triangle, we've only deployed about 25% of that. Having really good relationships, having sold sites to developers like Alliance, having partnered with developers like Endeavor and Ohala and different developers that are really well respected in Texas. We have so many developers now coming to us. And maybe this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about your background, Spencer, because before you were with us, you had a really unique background doing a lot of different things. One of the last things you did before starting with us was you were doing a lot of build to rent. And that part of the market has just been really impacted by the lack of capital.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so you were seeing that, especially on the land side. It was like really hard for developers to be able to go actually close on land sites. And we say no to most of the deals we look at because they just don't make sense. But we have gone, and like you said, Tim, very aggressively within a couple weeks, we've come in and like stepped in on a deal that a big national multifamily developer assigned to us, and we closed, and then partnered with Endeavor on a deal that I think we did maybe in 2 weeks, very quickly. But you've been on the other side of it where all this work gets done to get to the finish line, and then there's just not capital to close on the land.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe speak to what that's like.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time when I made the shift to BTR. I came into it in 2022. And so everything was red hot, of course, but we could start to see like things were slowing down a little bit. And so I think we closed one deal towards the end of 22 after I had started. And then all of 2023 was just chasing deals and just couldn't get anything to pencil. And, the finish line just kept moving as interest rates were hiking up and trying to solve for what is our yield on cost going to be and making sure we've got a spread to just get capital to look at it. And just none of those deals were working, but we did have a good pipeline and just, a lot of projects across the state of Texas that were already committed. And so it was interesting to see how those groups, obviously tighten the belt a little bit, make sure that deals were getting delivered on time and in his budget as much as possible, and just start leasing because they knew that they had to get them open. But it was an interesting time for sure. Because there obviously was then and still is now a huge need for housing in the state of Texas, but we're in this kind of interesting time where some areas there's a lot of supply available, some areas there's just not enough, and especially when you look at affordable housing. So I think the BTR space is definitely interesting, kind of niche that I think works really great in some markets, but it's kind of looking at sites a lot like multifamily deals where you've got to be able to get some density. And you've got to have access to a little bit greater utilities than what you would do on lower density single family sites. And so, we got to kind of see the slowdown a little bit there, and then everybody on the developer side started to see, okay, we've got to start solving to a different side of the equation here. But landowners didn't get that memo, and so we've kind of gone through this last 18 to 24 months now of some parts of the market correcting a little bit from that one guy that, got an LOI for $8 million, in 2022. He's still hanging on to that thing like it's a treasured flag. And, it's not the same anymore. Maybe it's a $4 million site today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was, a similar example. That was a deal that we closed with Ascent last year, was one that I think DMRE had under contract with a BTR developer in 21 or 22. Deal didn't make it, fell out, and I think it was under contract for probably close to $8 million, and I think we went and bought it for about $3 million. And just a great opportunity to go in. We got the deal done relatively quickly, had some hair on it. We dealt with wetlands and city utilities and all sorts of things as we're kind of running through and checking our due diligence boxes on the deal, but still just a great opportunity. And something else with that one, I guess we haven't touched on yet, was just it's in the city's ETJ.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the opportunities specifically in North Texas, but just, across the Texas Triangle as well, since the ETJ laws changed a couple of years ago, and just the opportunity to be able to stay in the ETJ, do more or less what you would like to do from a development standpoint, as long as utilities are available. And so, we've got that site in particular was an ETJ site with several others that we own, and just gives developers, if they are set up in the right way, where there's the land available, the utilities available, and you can program a site even, in and around wetlands or flood, and kind of figure that out. What we do when we're looking at sites is really just try to think of them like as a developer. And so I've got to draw back on my experience in the BTR space and before even that, and say, okay, like what would it take to go do this? That way we feel good about buying it and presenting to developers. Like, we've already checked a lot of these boxes, and we think this would be a great site for your product. And I think that helps the conversations.
Yeah, sorry to cut you out. Get in real quick, just because I think it'd be interesting for the audience to your background. Because I think when we talked to you, we had worked with you a little bit when you were at Highland, but I thought it was really interesting. I didn't know about your time at Cross and the $3 million Generals that you did across the state of Texas. Every Dollar General that we've all driven past in a small town, you probably put there. I think you had such a unique, you worked on multifamily, single family, BTR, commercial. We really liked your experience having worked with a lot of really small municipalities, because that's kind of what a lot of times we're working on, even though we're in these massive cities. You're not normally like working with us, city of Dallas. It's normally maybe one of these smaller towns that are growing really rapidly, but a smaller town. And you had such experience there, but maybe just get into that a little bit, because that unique perspective you have, I'm sure, has been really helpful jumping into on a daily basis with us. You're not just focused on like one asset type, and you're not even just focused on one city. And Houston's a lot different than Dallas. I mean, no zoning and the utilities and detention and the different things. So maybe get into that a little bit. Yeah.
So I think it all started essentially right after I got out of A&M, and I had a kind of an inroad through a friend to Highland Homes here in Plano. And so started off as a construction manager and did that for a number of years. And really, I think what that taught me more than anything was just project management. And so that experience really just translates to anything that you want to put it to. And so made the transition there again through a great connection into the commercial real estate space and working at Cross. And so immediately got to jump into a couple of multifamily projects that were already in the works, starting to come out of the ground, and really work right with the ownership group on getting those deals out of the ground and getting them turned over into vertical construction. And so right away just got a lot of great exposure with those guys. And then, after about a year or so doing that, jumped into the single tenant build to suit space in working specifically for the Dollar General account. And the greatest part about that was just the repetition. It was some days kind of brutal, but the great part about that was I think in about 3 years in that program, I built or finished or developed about 45 stores across the state of Texas.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So it's just, hair on fire a little bit, trying to get deals done. But it was a lot of Central Texas and West Texas. And so it was a lot of smaller towns. And, that might be the one thing, if they've got a stoplight, cool. Like, you want to be next to that at Main and Main, right? But a lot of four-way stops. And then everything from that, somewhere up in the Panhandle that I've got to drive a couple hours to being in Waco or right outside of Fort Hood, and being Amarillo, Abilene, like a lot of those bigger West Texas towns, still having to deal with zoning and get through, specific use permits, and just different. Every single deal was different. And a lot of those, I got the opportunity to interface with the seller and trying to go out and negotiate myself extensions, because like we were talking about capital on the BTR space, we had to close into construction. And so you've got to be fully entitled. You've got to have everything lined up to where the day I'm getting a permit, we're going to go close the loan. And I've got a contractor showing up there as soon as the bank says that we're good.
Yeah.
And we, because then I've got a construction timeline that I've got to meet. And so,
yeah, explaining that to a landowner in one of these small towns is tough, because that probably took anywhere from however many months to like over a year, depending on the situation.
Yeah. A lot of those cases, we did one deal that was pretty quick timeline, but for the most part, probably 4 to 6 months of planning. Where as soon as we got the deal approved by Dollar General's investment committee, we're starting A&E, getting plans designed, doing engineering. We're getting all of that done as quick as possible, and then permitting. And so some of those, the city would take a little bit longer, and said me going back hat in hand, say, hey, I need another 60 days, and I may or may not be able to pay you anything for it, but like, we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, thankfully, when you've got a Fortune 500 company behind you with a lease ready to go, you have some credibility to get some of those extensions. So that helps a lot. But yeah, definitely a great experience. And again, kind of that like rinse and repeat on building out and developing those deals. But at the same time, every single city was different. And sometimes it was dealing with the county, and sometimes it was going and sitting in P&Z and council meetings. Like, I might fly into Amarillo to go get something done, and I'm there for 2 hours, and I turn around and I come back because that's what we had to go present to make sure we got the deal done and keep it on the timeline. But that definitely exposed me to a lot, and more so, just a lot of great consultants that you lean on in trying to figure out who has that local market expertise. What engineer do we need to do do we need to hire because they did the deal next door? And what surveyor maybe drew this plat 5 years ago when they subdivided this property for the first time? And so I was able to build a lot of great relationships through the state that helped branch out, specifically whenever I made the move back to Highland and the HHS side BTR. I already had a lot of contacts that we could lean into to help get deals done. And then with that, even more so here, just kind of shifting focus now more towards the Texas Triangle, focusing in a lot of the same big cities that we were in on the BTR space, but looking at it a little bit differently now, and just trying to lean in on close to 10 years of relationships now on consultants in cities that we've known. A couple deals that we bought last year in a municipality. I've worked with that city engineer for probably 7 or 8 years now as he's moved, and we've looked at sites in different towns, but I've got a longer standing relationship than just his tenure at that place. So it helps keep up with a lot of, who's who and what's going on in the city. Like we mentioned, the one with we knew the sewer line was coming in, and that was just part of that relationship that's come out of a couple of years of just doing deals and being all over.
Yeah, no, that's good. I was thinking as you're talking, transitioning to the Texas Triangle, when you're talking to Tim about stuff in Houston or me up here in DFW or maybe Trip down in Austin, what are like, the markets are so different from a land and development standpoint. So what are like the top 2 things in each market that you think about that are kind of unique to those markets because they're different from a land perspective, and people that are in those markets would understand it? The people that don't have experience maybe trying to cross over into one of those other markets just wouldn't know that those are things really important to think about from a development standpoint.
Yeah. I think I'd probably start off with Houston, and probably anybody that's done a deal in or around Houston knows if you're in Houston, obviously no zoning, and so you just got to kind of watch out for that. But besides that, it's really detention and utility access, because Houston is more or less run by MUDs, especially as you get just outside of the city, which of course, city of Houston just is massive in their infrastructure and kind of the way that they've done a land grab and just sprawling all over the place. But then as soon as you get outside of that, it's just utility districts everywhere. And so it's about, do you know the engineer that runs that district? Have you talked to that attorney before? Are they building out new capacity? Are they open to it at all? Is it a developer run board, or is it a homeowner run board? And what are they open to? So those are probably the biggest 2 for Houston. And just trying to understand now, sitting in the investor side, is, if we've got a plan for this site needs 20-25% detention, we look at that on the front end of, okay, well, that actually drives up our basis on what's usable. But as a developer, how are they going to look at it? Because if they're Houston specific, yeah, they probably already have that kind of baked into how they're underwriting the deal. But somebody maybe coming in from Dallas that wants to do a deal down there, well, they're going to look at it differently now. All of a sudden, they took a loss on what they've got able to develop. So those are probably the 2 big ones for Houston. Central Texas is probably similar on just the utility standpoint, but then also just a whole lot more environmental activity that you've got to be cautious of. And again, kind of falling in on those relationships have been built over the years and working with great consultants that know, hey, you've got this endangered species on site, or this is in a specific area that, you can't touch, or you can only clear it within these couple of months of the year, and trying to know that ahead of time and just have those conversations on, what does permitting look like for this? I think that hits Central Texas harder than a lot of areas. It's obviously everywhere. You do have to be cautious of it. But that one specifically is, we looked at a site a while back, and I think the Georgetown kind of Liberty Hill area. And I just happened to talk to a consultant that's done some work for us. And I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? He's like, oh, I did the survey next door. I had to go crawl through this cave and count the bugs. I'm like, man, like, how long did that take? And, what is this going to cost? Yeah. Because what we really like to do in looking at deals is again, try to tee it up for developers. And so if we can know that going in, that's just information that we can pass along and hopefully help developers get deals done in a timely manner, where now they're not hammering us for 6 more months on their due diligence time to go get this done because nobody knew about it. Well, we knew about it because we went out and found it and we did the study and here's your report. So that's probably the more of the big one in Central Texas. And then for Dallas, I think it's probably zoning and utilities. And so there's obviously a lot more zoning up in DFW. And so that's where we have leaned in on specific markets where there's ETJ opportunities or sites that have maybe already exited the ETJ to just be in the county, and try to find where those pockets are and really position ourselves in a place where you can eliminate a giant variable of going through a zoning process, which is just time and money, and it's stressed for everybody because we're wondering if the deal is going to get done, and developers, doing their best to control something that's sometimes out of their control with city staff or P&Z, or you've got the maverick on the council that doesn't agree with everybody, and so we like that. But then also looking at specifically zone deals where there is some opportunity on, this product fits here, the city wants it here, and it's already entitled. Maybe there's some things that they're willing to go back and amend an older PD because they know it's not marketed anymore. They would rather get something on the ground today than wait on it. Sometimes those opportunities are fewer and far between. But trying to understand, okay, what is in here that a developer is going to want to run from, or what is enticing that will help make this site stand out and why we should go buy it rather than go buy something else. So that's been huge. And then I mentioned utilities. I think with some regulatory changes and some laws a couple of years ago, a lot of the Houston groups that have been doing utility districts for a lot of years came and planted a flag in Dallas and just kind of preparing for a new wave of development in MUDs and PIDs specifically. And so a lot of that is just trying to understand a lot of the big specifically single family developers are going out and doing their own MUDs now because they can justify it over several hundred acres and phase it out and get reimbursements. Even looking forward to, there's new programs out there now where there's a lot of forward facing finance where developers can get their money up front rather than have to front it out of pocket to get the utility infrastructure on the ground. So just trying to understand who the players are there, what regulatory bodies might push back against you trying to go do that sort of entitlement, and where there's opportunities for just big expansion products. When is there, like the example we gave with the sewer line coming online, was when will it be active and how much capacity can we get from it for our site? A lot of those are already, they're just spoken for before they're ever built. And, these pass through the city agreements between municipalities on sharing capacity and whose treatment plant can handle what. So that's probably the biggest one there. But yeah, each market, a lot of overlap, but also some unique challenges to each one.
One thing I was going to bring out, Spencer, is just the number of deals that you look at, on a daily basis, a weekly basis. People might think, oh, you just go buy, 20 deals and, you're working on those deals, but you're working on, looking at hundreds of opportunities. We make, I don't know what we made this year, but I know it's probably well over 100 offers, maybe 200 offers on sites across the Texas Triangle. So there's a lot of challenges to uncovering the right opportunity. Sometimes you get one and you think it's a good opportunity, then you do a little digging in, and there's some big problems. Like we had one here in Houston where the outfall was like 2 feet. And so the tension was going to take up half the site, and it just killed the deal. And you don't know that till you get into it, start with an engineer, and that happens a lot. And then the other challenge is, I think in my career, every cycle that we've gone through, the sellers get tougher and tougher as far as not adjusting to the market. We have developers all the time that say, hey, the market's, but to your point before, it's an $8 million site. Now it's a $4 million site. So of course the seller is going to price the market, right? And they're going to sell it for what makes sense for a developer. And unfortunately, that's not the case. A lot of the sellers will hold on to whatever the high water mark was last cycle. Many times it's maybe above that because they have even higher aspirations for their site. And just because the market adjusts, people don't sell their land; they tend to hold it. And so there's been a challenge this cycle of just a lot of looking through a lot of deals and having a lot of deals that are still pretty expensive. And so trying to find where's the value, where are the sellers who will actually sell at market, sell at a good price, that we can execute on. And then also the challenge of working through these development issues that just take time and being smart with your time, because you can go spend a lot of time on a dead deal. And so what for you, how do you kind of decide, all right, I've spent enough time on this deal, I need to let it go, not keep pushing it, versus, you know what, I need to keep fighting through all the obstacles on this one because this is a real deal. If we can wrangle this deal, we want to do it.
Yeah, it's definitely, a case by case. Like I have to ask myself that probably every time we look at a deal. And to your point, I think, where we're sitting right now in 2024, I think we made about 100 offers. We closed 8 deals. So that's, it's a pretty low conversion rate. We looked at even more than that. I would say we probably offer on 30 to 40% of the deals that we look at. And so, we've got to have kind of a quick look, and so much of that is just like that information gathering all the time. And, who did I talk to the other day that mentioned a site that they're working on, or, what do we know is already going on in this pocket? And so much of that we have the benefit of comes from the DMRE brokers that are, in tune with so many deals. We kind of already know a lot of the story around a site whenever it does come to us. But pretty quickly, again, it's, that initial checklist going through all this publicly available information on pipelines and water sewer and flood data and wetlands. Like we kind of comb through that pretty quickly and figure out, okay, what is the net usable? What are, is it on market or off? Okay, what are they asking? Like, is that reasonable or not? And is it worth like floating something out there? Sometimes it is, of just, can we get some feedback and see, does this deal make sense? And a lot of times is, we'll figure out pretty quickly, hey, half this side is flood. Like we just can't use it. It's only worth this. They've got in their head it's worth this. Well, I think we're just, we're too far apart. But, a lot of times it's, we try to get feedback to our brokers as quick as possible, just so that way, if they've got a deal, maybe it's not an Ascent deal, but they can get it in the hands of somebody else that might want to go do this. And maybe I can arm them with a little bit of information as well on, hey, I dug these 3 things up, maybe put that in your write-up when you send it to somebody to take a look at. Because they'll find it, and maybe it's negative, maybe it's not. But normally we'll try to turn comments back to the guys, inside of the day. Usually it's like within an hour of looking at deals. And when it goes beyond that is when we're having more conversations of, okay, maybe there's not a rush to get an offer out on this deal. What can we spend time on? Can we get with our title company to pull title info for us? We see if there's any kind of hair affecting the site that we wouldn't know until a month into DD. Well, to get to that point, we've put up earnest money. We've hired a consultant. We've hired surveyors to go out. Like we could do that now. We try not to abuse that at all. But if it's a site that we're serious about, we've obviously got some great relationships with title companies and partners that will tell us like, hey, we've got some information on this site that just helps us get to that a little bit quicker.
Yeah, the one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking was, Tim and I heard for years like, oh, you don't want to do your own investment deals because you'll be competing with your clients. And I think what's neat about it is, we just closed recently a project that we partnered on with Endeavor in Austin, largest land site that we had purchased to date. And then, the largest exit that we've had, just a really successful project.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about evaluating deals, I was starting to think, I don't know what the percentage is, but a good percentage of the deals you and I talk about are brought by developers. Mm-hmm. It's like, Endeavor brought us this deal, or Alliance brought us this deal, or, whoever it is, they brought us this deal to look at. Would we be interested? And like you said, a lot of times there's just not enough like juice in it for us because we have return hurdles we have to hit for our investors. And then other times there is, like doing another deal with Endeavor right now.
That's
and
right.
We love doing that. I mean, partnering with really quality sponsors where we're bringing in something that's really needed right now, and that's capital, like the ability to come in and close on land, all cash, like Tim said earlier, and the ability to carry that land for them in an environment where we believe this is one of the best times to be going and putting together a development project because construction pricing is low, much lower than it's been. It rarely ever comes down, but it has come down. And so it's great from that standpoint. And it's still very challenging to put deals together on the capital side. And so we had David at breakfast the other day with the principal of a large development company that was, how can we get in? How can we get into a JV with you guys? So I think that's a really fun part of it is, again, not every deal is going to work. We've had a lot of really interesting deals brought to us that we try to provide really quick feedback. Like, that's probably not going to work just from a return standpoint or a risk standpoint, whatever it is. And then there's been several that have worked now. And this Georgetown one that we recently closed was a great example of that.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point, Tom, that you and I were talking yesterday, and we were talking about one of our skill sets is not just seeing the market and knowing values and knowing cycles and, these different submarkets, but assessing sponsors. We've worked with hundreds of developers across the state, all different kinds of developers, and we've seen just incredible developers do a great job, and we've seen some that are not good and don't do a good job and have bad outcomes. And on the brokerage side, you're kind of getting to look over the shoulder and see these deals, from start to finish, and you see well executed deals and poorly executed deals, and so that's just been training now for decades. And so I think one of our skill sets is when we see a deal, we're not just looking at the deal, but also at who's a sponsor. What is how are they modeling this deal? What's their plan? What do they want to build on the site? Is it really a fit for that submarket? A lot of our expertise, through all the years of doing these deals, goes into that assessment, and really, I think, has helped us make some good decisions on the JV side. And it's also just really fun because these are some of the best developers and some of the best people that we know in the business. So getting to do it together. Getting to bring the value we have that we can bring to the table, and then get them bringing their value to the table. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so. One thing I was thinking about too that we should mention is we are looking to grow the team, and so I know we've interviewed some people about kind of trying to bring in more like an engineer specialist onto the team. Do you want to kind of speak to that role and what we've been looking for there? Just as we're expanding, we have this $100 million fund that we're placing, looking at a lot of deals, a lot of pretty complicated deals. We have a lot of great consultants we work with, but see the opportunity to grow the team right now in this current market.
Yeah, so we're calling it the development manager role, and we really like somebody with some civil engineering background or experience behind that, just to help with the volume of deals that we are assessing on a daily basis. And a lot of that is just that preliminary DD. But then beyond that, once we get a deal under contract and then furthermore, own that deal for a period of time, having somebody that can be in the driver's seat of all these conversations with the city, making sure the site checks out before we go buy it, and then also keeping that positioned in a way that's beneficial for developers down the road. And I think somebody that knows the end game coming from a development or engineering background and perspective would be a huge asset for the team. Obviously, we run kind of slim currently, and looking at a lot of deals, and with the size of the fund and what we're looking to place, we definitely have the need for it, and just trying to get through and make sure that we continue to deliver high quality investment opportunities for our investors, and then subsequently just have great sites for our developer partners down the road.
And we talked about it before on the podcast, we're really picky with who we bring onto the team. And so I know we've interviewed some good people, but just, hadn't found a fit yet for that role. But I've really appreciated just you joining the team now for almost 2 years, and just having you in the office, and you've you've stepped up and leading Bible study on Wednesday mornings here, and just really become a leader across the office, which has been a blessing, in addition to just the work that you do on the development side, looking at the deals, analyzing the deals. I think we were talking before the podcast started that you've got 2 girls, Tim's got 3, I've got 3. So there's 8 girls represented here.
Yeah.
And then Brad, who's listening in, has, how many girls do you have, Brad? Brad's got 4. So, so we've got 12 girls represented here.
Yeah,
that's right.
on this podcast. So, maybe speak to that a little bit, like just, being a dad in this business. I think, one of the things that's really important to us at DMRE and Ascent is trying to have like a good margin in your life, work-life balance, whatever it is. I mean, being present, like you're really involved at your church, Prestonwood, serving as a deacon there. And, I see you really try to intentionally be a good husband and a good father. And then serving as a deacon, like you actually serve and go and visit people in the hospital and do things like that. Love having that in our office, having others in our office see that we talk a lot about on this podcast. Like, it's not just about making a lot of money. It's not just about career. And for a lot of men, the whole focus is about career and work and advancing there, kind of at the cost of potentially everything else. And I can get to that later. But I think I'd love to hear your perspective on that, just because you really lead by showing that, like, I'm going to do drop off today, or I'm going to go pick up my daughter. Or I'm going to, you're really trying to be present in your family's life, which is really, I think, great for Tim and I to see, and encouraging and challenging for us too.
Yeah, no, really appreciate that. I would start by saying that I have not done it well for probably longer than I have. And that's part of what drives me to continue to be better, like as a husband, as a father, and as an employee, because there was a lot of years, especially when I was running so many deals, where it was just like work all the time. And you got to the point where it's like I wasn't doing that well, and I wasn't doing anything well. And so a couple of years ago, really just trying to make an intentional shift on, am I starting my day in the Word? And, that sets a tone for so much of my day, and like how I treat my wife, and then how I treat my kids. And so the last couple of years have been, we've just been incredibly blessed, and it's easy now to look in the rear view and be like, well, obviously, like, God's hand was always on it, but been so much more blessed now and over the past couple of years, just with opportunities and how our family's grown, and just really all of the things because of faithfulness, not just when God was being faithful to us, He always is, but just when we were more faithful to Him. And so the opportunity came about a couple years ago to become a deacon, and obviously it was just overwhelmed by being nominated, and then was selected for that. And so what I really have learned from that is just looking at when I was younger and just as a younger Christian as well, people that always like went off to go serve in, mission projects and those sorts of things elsewhere. And it kind of always in my heart was maybe a little jaded, but I was like, there's so much need here, like we should serve here. But I just didn't do a whole lot about it. And now I have this great opportunity to kind of fulfill that desire that I always had. And there's a need here. There's a couple guys from our life group. We get together a couple times a month and go serve. There's a widows class in our church, and we try to go do whatever we can for them. If it's like, taking care of their yard or change the light bulbs and air filters. I'm like, a lot of it's super simple.
That's so cool.
But the great part is, it's just an outreach, and some of that's come about just getting to visit with people in the hospital that, man, so a lot of them are having the worst day of their life, and some of them like have more joy in their day than I do. And so, it's just a testimony on itself, but that's been a huge blessing for our family. And then also just trying to be, like you said, kind of intentional with our kids. And I love getting to pick them up and drop them off when I can. Sometimes it's a hustle, try to get in and out of there. We joke that trying to get to church on Sunday morning, it's like the most unholy 15 minutes in the car before you get there. And some school mornings are like that as well. I'm currently coming off of a week where Cammie's been out of town, so I've been solo dad for a couple days, and very grateful she's coming back today. But yeah, you also mentioned the work-life balance thing. There was a number of years where I think I used that as a cop-out to just say, like, there's no such thing as work-life balance. Yeah. And I was really just kind of buying into an excuse for why I wasn't performing well. And so really just trying to correct that again, just kind of stay grounded in like what's really important. And then, furthermore, and what I applaud you guys so well for setting up with DMRE and Ascent is just this idea of just Christian leaders in business and how you conduct yourself, how you plan for the future. All of that is just so important. And having that modeled well here by you guys has just also been just a huge blessing for a way to say, okay, like this is what a business leader looks like. And, we joked about it, I think before the podcast started that like, I don't hear cuss words flying around this office. And that's, it's a small thing, but it's a big thing, especially from coming from a construction and development background, like where that's very like commonplace. And I'm not knocking any individuals for it, but it is a different culture in a way that we conduct ourselves that glorifies God in the way that we do our work. And that, we ask for blessings on deals. And, I pray with my girls at night. We ask for blessings for our family. We're thankful for the things that we have, but also being specific on, God, should we go do this deal? And if we're going to do it, we just ask your hand is on it. Yeah. And, that's a whole other perspective in business that I've gained from you guys and just how you implement it. So thank you for that. Yeah. But that's been a huge part just in my time here with you guys in that growth as well.
Well, it's so cool, Spencer. Thanks for sharing all that. And it's so cool to hear, and hopefully for our audience to be encouraged. All of us have had times where we've done things wrong. And I can say the same thing for me where I didn't prioritize my marriage or my kids the way I should have. And there's not a sense of like where I can say like I've arrived. I'm sure you wouldn't say it either, like it's perfect now. But when you start to prioritize things the right way, I think there's so much hope and encouragement. Things can get so much better and you can be so much more fulfilled. And also, I love to hear about serving too. I was reading 1 Timothy this morning about taking care of widows. So it's funny that you share that about this widows class. But when you start to prioritize all these things, you don't get less of business success. A lot of times you end up getting more. And there's so much more richness in your life. And that's something we really want to promote on this podcast is not just going to make a lot of money and being good at deals, but being good men, being good women, being people that have real values that are great people, leaders and people serving your community. There's just so much benefit to that. So I love just hearing your story and hearing the transition of making a decision. Hey, I don't want to be this way anymore. I want to start going the right direction. And then just the testimony of how that's blessed you and your family.
Yeah, you talk a lot about in Bible study about how God intended us for human flourishing. I know that's like a term that you use a lot, and it's such a good reminder because I think a lot of times it's the way that we can just naturally think is kind of like all the stuff with God and the church is like, don't do these things and it's not that fun, and all the things that I really want are like, I got to go get them for myself and I got to go focus on myself. And I think what you guys are saying is it's interesting, not that just because we honor the Lord, we just get all this like money coming in and all this blessing, but it is that he has created us to honor him first and worship him first. And then he has intended us to flourish. Like that's what he wants. He does, and the decision to go and deprioritize all the most important things just leads to a miserable life in and of itself. And again, the best life isn't based on your bank account. It really isn't. I mean, I was talking to a guy yesterday that's getting married in a couple months and really excited for him. And that's super genuine. Like for me, getting married to Jackie, having my kids, I mean, that is the biggest blessing in my life. Yeah. I don't thank God for some deal I closed 3 years ago, even though I probably should, but I'd thank God for my kids all the time. It's like we forget about the deals. We don't remember the money, all that. We're very thankful for that provision, but that shouldn't be the priority. And so, love you sharing all that. And again, you've led by example, and we see it. The other guys and girls in the office see it, and it's encouraging. And that's the kind of culture we're trying to create here at DMRE and Ascent is, we're whole people. We're more than just workers. We're going to have times where we're going through really hard things. We're going to have times where everything's going great, but we want to be able to come around each other and care about one another, encourage one another, and get through that. And so it's been fun to have you on the team. It's been fun to work on these big deals together. And I'm really excited about this 2026 and, placing a lot of this fund that we're working on. And then the future beyond that, I think, we're very excited about.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on, Spencer. It's been fun.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. Pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. And as we mentioned earlier, we are looking to grow the Ascent team. So check out that job description. Send us an email. You can email me, Tom, at DMRE.com. Happy to respond with that. Can get you in touch with Spencer. And then, even beyond that, we've had other ideas about growing the team as well. So if you're interested, reach out, and we'd love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.